Super Mario 64 was a groundbreaking game for the time, revolutionizing the way games set in a polygonal 3D space should operate and feel. 8 years later, with the launch of Nintendo DS, came a full-on remake of the revolutionary game, with added content and the functionality of being a portable way to play the game. To this day, people still discuss which version is better, and today I want to go over the main differences of each version and why it really doesn't matter. This is the determinant if someone likes 64 DS. Can they deal with the different controls? The original was made for the N64's analog stick, which allows for full 360-degree movement, as well as fine-tuned speed adjustments depending on how far the stick is tilted. While DS lets you use the touchscreen as a pseudo-stick, most people play the game with a D-pad, which only allows for the 8 rigid cardinal directions. This by itself wouldn't be too bad, but they thought it would be a good idea to add some weird input smoothing, which results in what are essentially misinputs if you treat the game the same as the N64 original. I found that if you take some time to stop and assess what you have to do, and therefore stop movement altogether for a moment, that resets any input smoothing that would have happened if you were to go from movement right into some sort of maneuver. It's not a perfect fix, but you can work around it. No, playing this game on the 3DS or Wii U with their analog sticks doesn't magically fix this. The stick is actually emulating a D-pad, so you get the rigid movement with something that's supposed to give you total movement freedom. Some folks out there mope about how DS requires a run button to be held in order to move faster, lest I remind everyone that every 2D Mario game utilizes a run button, not to mention 3D Land and 3D World also having run buttons, not to mention the Switch port of 3D World bringing an Odyssey-type open world mode for the game, where again, you have a run button. Despite that, specifically Bowser's Fury was lauded for the fresh perspective it brought to the table, even though you have to hold a button to move faster. In fact, I personally prefer when games give me a run button. I feel it's a more natural way to alter your movement, as opposed to tilting a stick less, as oftentimes I find it hard to dial into what degree of movement I want with a stick, as opposed to just holding down a button to zoom. This is to say, I don't think the game has a run button is a valid critique. Additionally, the port that's part of the 3D All-Stars pack actually lets you play with the D-pad, without any input smoothing, and it doesn't feel all that great. It's hard to do more precise movement on tighter platforms, as the D-pad makes you run at full speed, which is likely why they had the DS version use a button to run. So there's an additional counterpoint to the criticism of DS's run button. Although I won't deny that the N64 version is overall a smoother experience in terms of movement, especially if you're used to more recent titles like Odyssey and the 3D action games. This will feel similar enough to those. Except for the wall kicks, you have to hit the jump button right as Mario is touching the wall, whereas in the DS version, as long as you're inputting a direction into the wall, Mario will just slide down, and at any point, you can wall kick. Changing focus, the camera. It sucks in the N64 version, straight up. It never felt consistent as to what it allows for and where. Sometimes I can rotate it all around, but it hits an arbitrary barrier for no reason, regardless of the direction I'm rotating it. Even though the DS version has its cam buttons on the touchscreen, it's easy to reach over and hit them as long as you're not playing on a 2DS. And you can rotate the camera all around without any stupid arbitrary wall. The DS version features a button to recenter the camera behind you, which I found myself doing a lot. Yeah, overall, I find the camera on DS to work much better than it does on N64. Again, the DS version absolutely trounces the N64 version. There's a total of 150 stars to collect, which is 30 more than the original. This means that every level has one more mission than the N64 version, some of them having all new mechanics like the speedrunning Switch Stars or the sneakily scouting Silver Stars. There are 4 total characters to play as instead of just Mario, and they all have unique attributes, and some stars require a specific character to obtain. After you unlock a character from their wholly unique level and boss fight, you can switch between them in the same room as the secret slide, but you don't have to keep coming back to this room to switch characters. My strat, if I'm going back to play this game, is getting everyone unlocked as soon as possible, then switching back to Yoshi. Why? Well, when you enter a level as Yoshi, you're also given the option to pop on the cap for one of the bros. Yeah, you do drop the cap when you take damage, but you can pick it back up if you're quick. So I think it's worth it in exchange for what's basically a character select screen. Any character can pick up any cap, but with some stars requiring Yoshi, I still prefer unlocking everyone and doing the cap strat. There is one new star that I think is questionable: catching 8 shining rabbits. You see, instead of the small handful of rabbits in the N64 version, there are 7 rabbits to catch for each character, so 28 rabbits total. Once you catch a rabbit, it unlocks a minigame you can play in the rec room, and there's a chance the next time you see it, it'll be white and sparkling, and catching 8 of them gives you a key to the unmarked door for a star. The devs didn't seem like they even wanted to have this in the game themselves, as all of Yoshi's rabbits are right there in the main castle courtyard. So just catch all of them once, then repeatedly enter and exit the castle to see if any of them are white, rinse and repeat. It's almost trivial at that point. Despite these points, there are certain folks out there who have a strong preference to one over the other, and speaking from my personal experience, the version that someone prefers, more often than not, is the one they grew up with, and possibly have nostalgia for. In my case, it was the DS version. I was able to work with the controls in order to play this game that I could take anywhere, and play for the first time as an 11-year-old. This was the first game that I learned inside and out, and I was proud that I could do a 100% run of it casually over the course of 2 or 3 days. And the minigames were a great break from the main game. Folks out there who prefer the N64 original, generally speaking, prefer the tighter controls, various exploits, for some the speedrun ability, and just overall charm of this being a launch N64 game. Not to mention, it's the version that's getting more love from the modding and ROM hack community. Personally, I'm fine playing either version these days, albeit I have tended to prefer the N64 version because of the better feeling controls. But I still like the DS version for its extra content, and I'm able to work with the controls despite having played the N64 original. Who am I kidding? The DS version is way better. It lets you eat the rabbits.